Our final interview of the morning at 9:55 a.m. is Labour analyst Patrick Deale, and he's here to talk to us about the unemployment situation in the country, or rather, fingers being pointed at unions, suggesting that because unions are demanding high salaries and wages for their members is the reason why the unemployment rate is so high in the country. So, does that make sense? Do we equate it in that way? What's the best way to move forward regarding this matter? And the person who obviously made these statements was the police commissioner Mkwanazi, suggesting that obviously the unions are to blame for the current situation. Patrick Deale, a very good morning to you. Welcome to the program.
Morning, Julie. Good to be here. Thank you.
Is he calling it out correctly? Are the unions, in fact, to be blamed for this? Are they charging very high fees? What is going on here? Or is it really the situation with government not, fulfilling their roles? Way too much corruption, money's being channeled in the wrong direction. Not putting money where it needs to be funneled through to create much needed jobs.
Julie, it may be some of those latter issues, but I think to address the central question about the particular statement that was made, effectively blaming unions for the high wages, which restricts the employers to employ more people, on the basis that, you can employ more people if they have less wages rather than the other way around and have a few people earning more and so on. But I think that the comments were misplaced in the sense that the context in which they were made was the wrong context. The context for an overall debate on labour market dynamics, supply and demand of labour, availability of state money to pay wages, to pay salaries, and skills required and labour requirements. That overall general debate about the labour economy, essentially, is one which should be balanced and should not only be a question of blaming one or other of the parties for perceptions that union members, particularly state employees, civil servants, are overpaid. I think that creates an imbalance in the discussion. Yes, it's a healthy discussion to have, but the context and the place to have it was not in the context that this particular statement, in my view, was made, because it points the finger of blame to one party in the collective bargaining process. We have a system of collective bargaining in the country that allows employers and unions to negotiate with each other, and they either agree on what the wages or the salary should be, or they don't. And the cut and thrust of that is the proper place to have these kinds of interactions, where Labour may say to employers, look, if you cut down, if you provide better services, if you provide more efficient services with least waste, etc., we could then be able to provide more people to employ. You would have more money to spend. Don't blame only the wage component of the problems of the shortage of money for the state available to pay decent wages, because at the end of the day, that's what unions are there for, are to defend their workers and to pay what they consider to be a fair wage, and for employers to agree or not agree. And so in that context, if you're having a general discussion about, in the context of wage negotiations, or if you're sitting in NEDLAC or in some academic context to have this debate, then it's entirely appropriate to have it. But to come of it out of the blue in this context, when particularly in the police environment, things are pretty delicate at the moment.
Well, obviously, someone did shoot out at him and suggested that he should concentrate on police matters and not labor related issues. That being said, being a labor analyst yourself with deal attorneys, what do you make of our current situation in the country? Um, we have a huge unemployment rate. What is going wrong that we can't close that gap, that we can't create more jobs for our unemployed youth? And also, I was speaking with someone who was lived in Australia for many, many years. Coincidentally, we were at a function yesterday, and she spoke about, I can't quite remember the terminology she used, but something about the shared jobs or something along those lines. So Australians are allowed or are enabled to spend more quality time, the focus being on family time, but also to try and create more job opportunities. I hope you understand what I'm trying to get
Yeah.
at. And do you think it could be workable in our country? But as I say that as well, Patrick, I am aware of the fact that we have huge issues around transport costs in our country. So that might just defeat the objective.
Look, Julie, I mean, those are issues that could be talked about, but I think that they are more of a level of detail on fine tuning. I don't think in South Africa, in a sense, we're in a place where even the luxury to have that kind of quite sophisticated discussion at that level. The overall problem that we have in the labor market is the lack of growth. Because if you have a cake, you can only share it amongst so many people. But if you have a shrinking cake, you are unable to share it amongst the available people, let alone people who are coming into the market more and more. So the overall economic cake, as it were, is what the problem is. And you need to, what we need collectively, which has been an ongoing debate, we have a national development plan, for example, which is a good plan, but the environment within which to attract investment, big time investment, big inflow, to make South Africa an investable place is where the big energy can go to at a macro level to create an environment within which people want to invest. It's a preferred destination for their investments. Remember, they can invest their money, international money, or even local money, can invest anywhere they want to. We want them to choose South Africa to invest because it's investment friendly. We don't need overall too much regulation. We don't need strangleholds, which are disincentives for people to invest in existing businesses, to grow existing businesses, like our auto businesses, for example, like new businesses that could come in, which are in fact coming in, particularly in IT and AI, like Amazon and so on, which is encouraging. That's where we need it. Those big levers would create multiple jobs. It needs confidence to be able to know that if we're going to invest in it, our money is safe, we can make a reasonable return on our investment. And also, it triggers lower down the economic activity. People have been pushed to the fringes to get skills to come back into the economy as the cake grows, to create small businesses, to create the multiplication factor, where small businesses start, they employ one or two people, then they employ more, and so it starts. So we need a top, big picture, big wheels kind of way to generate the jobs, and also at the lower end. And of course, the ongoing issue about unemployability, that we don't have in a modern economy enough people with the appropriate skills to do the jobs that are required, because machines and AI, etc., is now taking over a lot of the routine jobs that could have been done by people. But still, services, tourism, agriculture, all of those where hands-on work is required is where the opportunities are and where the jobs will come from. They're going to come from the private sector. They're not going to come from the government sector, but they come from the government, creating an enabling environment for which to partner with the private sector. I mean, for example, Transnet are now talking about a big new plan to privatize certain rail links in the road freight industry, which is a very encouraging sign. That's what we need to stimulate the economy and get people in here and excited to grow, that this is the place to be.
Patrick, you talk about privatization, and that's very encouraging what Transnet is doing right now. But there are also concerns that once a lot of the industries do go the privatization route, costs, those commodities or those services will eventually be that much more expensive. Your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's necessarily the same. Um, it's an eternal debate, and it's obviously a debate worthwhile. And you need to take these things on a case-to-case basis. There have been examples of privatized services to citizens, like water supply, electricity supply, road freight supply, transport, and all of those kinds of things elsewhere in the world, which have worked really well, and they've also created competition amongst them, so that they compete with each other in supplying water or supplying electricity and so on. The competition amongst them tends to drive down prices, not drive it up. Whereas if you have a monopolistic kind of institution like the state, for Eskom, for example, it's a single provider. What does it do? It's got a shrinking need for, or a shrinking customer base, because people are going to energy, and it is raising its tariffs higher and higher, 13% this year, for example. And so it's not, it's the privatization creates competition. Competition brings prices down and it creates efficiencies to maximize the proper use of facilities, the proper delivery of services. I think it's a more efficient way of delivering services and getting your best value for money than the state doing it.
Eskom wasn't able to provide sufficient electricity, and there were a whole host of issues why, their service delivery was so shockingly poor, which forced a lot of householders that could afford it to go the solar power route. And it was encouraged at that time. But now it seems as if those very people are going to be penalized, because they're going to have to be they're going to be taxed in a certain way for the losses that is being incurred by Eskom. But they, in the first place, were not providing sufficiently due to, of course, mismanagement and corruption.
Yeah, it's a bizarre situation, Julie, where you're actually having kind of reverse economic principles happening here. If you're providing a service, you've got many customers, they want to use you. You can spread the costs around, and you can reduce the costs of your services. But if you're providing a bad service and you're not using your resources, your money, and so on, you're not spending it while let alone having it stolen, and so on. You're going to start running out of problems. You're going to start going to government for money. The taxpayers have to pay more and more, and the more it carries on, the more people find their own way of doing things, and they find better ways and cheaper ways, and they start losing customers. And once that happens, you get the Escoms of this world start getting less and less revenue. So they, without fixing their problems entirely, they've done a lot of work. Got to give them credit. They've done a lot of work, a lot of very good work in turning things around, and we have to recognize that credit to them. But at the same time, there's a sort of break-even point about whether or not they are using their resources more efficiently than their past to be able to not give increases to customers. But because they're losing customers, they haven't reached that turning point where they're on control of their costs, they're control of their sort of unit for production output efficiencies, and having to charge for more services because they're losing their customers. So it is reverse economic policies or principles.
Okay, I'm going to wrap up with two questions now. You touched on AI, and obviously that would mean an impact on our unskilled or semi-skilled labor force. That's going to have a direct impact. And yet we as a country need to move along and keep abreast with technological advancements. Otherwise, will lag behind, behind other countries. That's the one part of the question. How do we address that? And then with Elon Musk showing interest in coming to South Africa with all of his amazing AI technology, but at the same time also with conditions regarding taxes. We need those taxes to really get the machinery going here in South Africa. How do you view those two issues?
Look, insofar as the AI is concerned, you know, all of us are trying to grapple with what the effects are, and I think it's going to, affect basically routine type of work, where AI can produce things that humans can produce, but that humans have physically been producing. I mean, my own trade as a lawyer, we produce leases and contracts of employment and so on. We craft them and we keep copies of them, and we create our own precedents or the precedents available, and we charge for those services.
And
But
we
in
can
fact,
get that off. We can get that off Chat GPT now. So
well, that's simply just doing us out of a job, So, but it is true. But it's a practical example, and where the end of it is, I don't know.
right,
So we have to, people like me, medical, all sorts of professions and so on, which AI can do the routine, which actually never routine. We like to say it's customized and so on, which of course it
right,
is. You can't just pick it off the shelf and say, well, here it is, and so on. But the point is that a lot of these workspaces, I'm talking now, they're sort of reasonably skilled. Hopefully, we are reasonably skilled in doing this kind of work. Just an example that AI could replace it, and pretty quickly, and it's now. And where else can lawyers and doctors add value? What else can they do? And they will just have to use innovation and motivation, and use AI, embrace AI to the best advantage that they possibly can. And in fact, the Law Society is running seminars, webinars for lawyers on how to adjust to AI and how to use it appropriately. Insofar as Elon Musk is concerned, I mean, Elon Musk is got to be the biggest game changer that I think we've seen in modern times. And his introduction of Starlink and others into South Africa, I think, should be welcomed. It creates competition. It creates a whole new system and puts people on their toes to go with the any disturbance in the market, which is a good disturbance. A lot of people would think it's not a good disturbance because it affects their competition, the current providers and so on. But they will use it. They will have to adapt to use it for their own benefit and find how they can work with another player in the field. And then the other, obviously, Musk has got a range of so many innovations that he could bring in and so on. I think all of these things are welcome. I mean, another one that now we're getting into real future, Julie. We're talking about self-driven cars and so on, and
yeah,
taxis. Just you do put something on your phone, and a taxi arrives at your front door and takes you to Woolworths. I mean, that kind of thing is. I mean, I can't get my head around that, quite frankly. But that's the kind of future that somehow in the next generation or two will be passe. It'll be normal to them, which for us is so hard to internalize, really. I mean, you talked about taxes as well. I think it was the other point that you talked about. I mean, the receiver of revenue is actually a very efficient service, and they're using AI itself now to track what we do with our income, with tax returns and so on. And they are monitoring everything that happens. And the more they do, the more and more the loopholes and the trickery that goes on around tax is going to be eliminated and exposed, and so on. So, I mean, and basically improve the overall efficiency of tax collection, tax compliance, because people know that they can't, fool the system if there's this higher intellectual machine which is,
right.
working for the taxman, really. So I think that's a very positive thing, and it'll just make.
Well, all I can say is, and I'll let you come in to wrap up, is that the taxes being collected from this very small base of taxpayers, uh, as long as government is able to utilize it in the right way. Currently, I mean, you often ask what's happening to my taxes because of all the corruption that is in place at government level. So um, it would be wonderful to see the efficiencies and proficiencies of SARS in other government departments, because then we will be a winning nation.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no question about that. And thankfully, I think there are signs of that happening in other departments as well. I think there's been a big shake-up. All the people, or look, there's still a lot of underhand crime. I mean, we haven't talked about crime and corruption as an old-time subject itself, which lurks beneath the system. And so long as all spotlights are headed on that, and at the same time these efficiencies of improving the system is concerned, for doing things properly, working above the sort of the blue line of law and order, and to push down the blue line of law and order into those who would corrupt it. The more we make progress on that, the less we will be able to be concerned about the fact that our money is not being spent properly. It's being stolen, it's being diverted overseas and so on. Very complex, criminal syndicates operating and so on. I mean, it's sinister stuff, Julie, and that is, as you say, that is something that there's work going on in there, but overall, it's going to take a long time to get that out of the system, to get those basic metrics right. I mean, you can't have 5 to 6 million people responsible for paying 80% of the taxes for a population of 60 million.
Absolutely.
And 25 million people living on grants. How is that going to work?
It's not workable.
Unsustainable.
Patrick, that's where we're going to have to leave it. I could sit here all day talking with you, but my time's up on the show this morning. Thank you indeed for your insights. Till the next time. Go well.
My pleasure, Julie. Anytime. Thank you.
It is 10:18, exactly time for me to wrap up. Thank you indeed for your time. I do hope you've enjoyed all of the interviews that we had this morning. I do want to remind you that the African Muslims Agency's Fired Up topic is: you will not achieve everything you dream about in life, but you will not achieve anything until you dream about it first. So that is, of course, the Fired Up series with Hafiz Imran Chunara. Thank you indeed from me, Julie Ali, till next Monday at the same time. Drive carefully, stay safe, and Khudafiz. Thank you. Bye-bye.